All right. Yeah, I I don't see if anybody from the Anchor Recovery Center is on. And if they are not on, then let's move forward and just open the meeting. Go for it.
All right, this meeting is called to order. Thank you all for coming very much. I hope you all are well and safe. And I'll make a plug. I hope you're vaccinated. If you're not, we have plenty. Give us a shout. We have a very interesting agenda and guest today, Sheriff Tony Spurlock from Douglas County, Colorado, who is from a state that has a history of marijuana legalization. And so we're going to hear about that today. And we're very glad he could be here with us, taking the time. And I know Sheriff O'Neill helped get that, helped get him here. So Sheriff O'Neill, thank you. Do you want to do introductions for Sheriff Spurlock, or do we just say we are a drug-free communities coalition that represents all 12 community sectors? And I can just see from the folks on here today, we are well represented. We have faith, we have law enforcement, community folks, healthcare, education.
Politicians.
Our political representatives or their staff are here. So
Yep.
I think that probably suffices. And then in the chat, Sheriff Spurlock, you can see people are putting in where they're all from. I think that's what we'll do so we can have the most of his time.
Correct.
And I will accept a motion to approve the minutes. They were all sent to you. If someone could make that motion and state their name when they do so.
Robert Bowen, North Country County Bus Center.
Thank you,
Motions.
Robert. Is there a second?
Second.
Patrick Hickey. Thanks, Pat. Any discussion? All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Carried. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anita.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much to everyone who has joined us. And a very special thank you to Sheriff Spurlock from Douglas County in Colorado, and to Sheriff O'Neill, our intrepid Jefferson County Sheriff, who brokered the deal, so to speak, and we're grateful. Is the Anchor Recovery Center in the house? Okay. Anchor is not present, so for updates, Tammy and Kathleen, would you like to give a brief update?
Sure. We're in smack in the middle of focus groups for Healthy Jefferson / Youth Coalition with the partnership of Belleville, Henderson, Lafargeville, and Watertown. We just finished, we have one more left in Watertown at the middle school, but we did just finish the high school and did do some in the middle school. And then we're headed to Belleville tomorrow and then Lafargeville. So we'll complete on Wednesday. It's over 70 youth completing focus groups. And the focus is on basically what substance is being used right now, or it's most easily accessible, and where is that coming from? Legalization of marijuana and the perceptions, and what do youth feel it means for them and that it means for adults, and what do they see out there for prevention right now, and what would be effective to them, as well as a final question about well-being and just general well-being and where they are emotionally, given that they've, had such a disruption for the last year of their life. So we will love to report that to you because it's a pretty full circle focus group. So thank you for everybody who supported that.
Awesome. Would anybody else from any of the sectors provide an update? Marijuana related or otherwise? Oh, Mr. Hickey, Neighborhood Watch.
Somehow I knew you'd be calling on me. We have our leaps and bounds into Neighborhood Watch. 19 localized neighborhood signs are already installed. We have 15 more that are due to arrive at my house on Friday. The larger entrance signs, after about the 6th or 7th revision of a quote that we've had issues with, has been finalized, and my understanding that order has been placed for 11 entrance signs coming into the city. I don't know the delivery time frame, and then we'll have to hand them off to the city to install, but all the contracts are done. They're finalized for amounts, and I feel really comfortable with how we're proceeding so far.
Totally. And so thank you very much, number one, to all the people on Neighborhood Watch, as well as to our law enforcement who is helping, who is supportive of the effort, and to everybody else who's been involved in the committees in making all this happen. Is the anchor in the house now? Okay. Would anybody else like to provide an update before we go to Sheriff Spurlock? 3, 2, 1, you had your chance. Over. Okay. I would like to introduce Sheriff Spurlock. He is the sheriff for Douglas County. And what is the city you're in? Castle Rock, is that correct?
Yes, our county seat is Castle Rock.
Castle Rock. Okay, wonderful. And Sheriff Spurlock is going to talk about just simply the impact of marijuana legalization, recreational marijuana legalization on the various community sectors, good, bad, and indifferent. And without any further ado, Sheriff Spurlock, you got the floor, or the Zoom, whichever.
All right, for the Zoom. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here real quick so I can go through a quick PowerPoint, and then we'll talk a little bit about that. And as I was telling him earlier, I'm much more skilled at Microsoft Teams than Zoom. So hopefully I do this the right way, and we'll see if it works out. Yes, I'm at the bottom. Let's go to the top here. And it should be working. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thanks for Sheriff O'Neill for reaching out to me. And we go back a little bit from some training, and my hopes are that I get to go up to Jefferson County, New York, since she's been to Colorado, and I can see where you guys
come on down.
I'd like to go there, so it'll be nice. So real quickly, my unique position as a sheriff in Colorado is I'm the past chair of the Rocky Mountain HIDA and still an executive board member for the Rocky Mountain HIDA. And I also represent the state of Colorado for the Western State Sheriffs Association, particularly about issues that we've had in regards to marijuana and some of our legislative issues. And I had the pleasure of being the past president of the County Sheriffs of Colorado. So what we have done really was try to put together an education program for our state to see what the marijuana impact really is, and talk about the elephant in the room and some of those other things. So hopefully I'll go through a quick PowerPoint presentation here, and then hopefully what I can do is I can talk to you about some questions that you have. So hopefully you can see my presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, and all you need to do is press on the screen. There you go. Awesome.
There we go. All right, very good. So real quickly here, we're just going to talk about some past drug policy. You know, what is it really about? How does it affect the drug use, price, availability, the perception of the risk? What is people's attitude? What's really the truth? And I this slide in here because it's a little bit, the data is from 2015, 2016, but that's important when I tell you about later about the percentage of use of alcohol, tobacco, and other illegal drugs, and then what we will see about what has happened after the passage of our Amendment 64. One of the other interesting stats is, 90% of Americans do not use illegal drugs, and that's an important thing to remember. But one of the things that we do talk about is the issue of how we got to where we're at. Between 2000 2008, you can see is where we started our medical marijuana program, and it went from a very small, I want to make sure I go back to that one. It went from a very small number to quite a large medical marijuana card holders. And basically what that meant is that you could go to any physician, and the statute basically said anyone who was a doctor. So if you held a title of doctor and you were licensed in the state of Colorado as a doctor, you could issue a marijuana card, and then that card would give the holder permission to grow marijuana in their homes and be in possession of marijuana. And that really started the issues that we started to have that became an effect on our society. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But you could see where it went from 1,000 to 4,800 marijuana cards and dispensaries across the state in a very short period of time. Then in 2013, it became legal. Amendment 64 was passed. And since then, where you could grow marijuana in your house, you could only have a certain number of plants, and then they started stacking the cards on top of each other. So you can end up having, instead of 10 plants, you could have 10 people living in your house as caregivers. All of a sudden you have 100 plants. And before you know it, you have a community. And here's the thing, I'm the first to say that I'm sure, and I know that there is a meaningful reason for some doctors to prescribe medical marijuana or marijuana synthetic to certain patients to have certain kinds of illnesses. And that was one of the things that we kept getting pushback on all the time. The fact of the matter is that that's a very small number of our society that would use that kind of drug for some kind of treatment, as compared to the amount of people that were applying for the medical marijuana cards, simply so they could just grow their own marijuana in their houses and use it. And so 64 came along, it kind of restructured it a little bit. And then what happened is in November of 2012 and through 2014, we really changed the constitutional amendment that would allow recreational purpose of marijuana for anyone under the age of 21. That in itself really made some differences because it opened up the ability to have retail stores, cultivation operations. And what that really meant for the state of Colorado was changed our landscape from working illegal marijuana grows in our national forests and in our parks and open spaces to really bringing that in. And most of that was done, for the most part, done by cartels, bringing farmers up. It's a tragic story all the way around because they would human traffic people from other countries to bring them up and to force them to labor into the farms. And then, and if they got caught, they didn't care. There was no protection for them. They were living in horrible conditions in our national forests. And obviously, some of those people were protecting themselves because their family members in their country of origin were being harmed. So it really did move that into our homes, into the houses in our residential areas in the state of Colorado. And in 2017, Bill 1220 was passed restricting how many plants people could have. So we saw that there was a problem. It took us from basically 2008 to 2017 to realize, wait a second, we're having houses burned down. We're having all kinds of problems. The black market is not been curbed. And so what we need to do is make sure that we can eliminate some co-ops. And so 1220 was passed and it didn't have any problems passing the House and the Senate to really do some restricting of how many plants people could have in their homes for personal use. And then our state statute that allows law enforcement to influence that. Essentially what they did is they minimized the offense of it. So 2 ounces or less is a petty offense, 2 to 6 ounces is a misdemeanor 2, which is really nothing. And more than 6 ounces was a misdemeanor 1. And then of course, more than 6 ounces, you'd have to really have argument to say you were cultivating and you were selling it on the black market for anything more than 6 ounces. And law enforcement would really have to spend the time focusing on those kinds of investigations. And were we really going to, again, put all kinds of people into jail and write them tickets for holding 6 ounces or more of marijuana when, quite frankly, it was more dangerous to run a stop sign in the state of Colorado, penalty-wise, than it is to have 6 ounces of marijuana. Marijuana concentrate really is a problem, and I'm going to go to that in a little bit later here. But when we start talking about marijuana concentrate and what that converted itself into our edibles, and what that made a difference in regards to possession and use. And again, you can see the amounts and the charges. And then our most effective, or the most recent bill, 19-1263, which really took effect last year, prohibits custodial arrest for anyone in possession of 2 ounces of marijuana or less. So essentially, we were not allowed to arrest anyone. We could still write them a summons, but it affected law enforcement's ability on going after other kinds of collateral criminal activity that is around the drug world. And then, of course, we had our first court of appeals case, People v. Garcia Gonzalez, which really changed the way that we conduct our investigations. Which basically restricted the number of plants of what you could have in your house and how we would articulate that before we could go into the house to do search warrants or really address them as a part of the black market and the marijuana distributors. And what was important there, and you might want to watch this with your legislators and those of you who influence the legislators in your state. One of the big issues is that if we legalize marijuana and we allow it to happen in all of our shops and we make it commercial, we tax it. When we tax it, we'll have all this there'll be a plethora of money coming in. Well, essentially what happened is all of the restrictions that the government put on to sell legalized marijuana drove the price of the marijuana up, and the black market would still be able to function because they could sell marijuana just like they had been doing for years on the street at a lower price than what you could legitimately go in the store and buy it for. So it even impacted the distributors, because in the beginning you could go in most communities and there were distribution stores opening up all over the place because it was an opportunity to make some quick cash. City councils and county commissioners says this is a great way, we can tax it, we can do all these kinds of things. But in Colorado's law, the use of that money was very, very restrictive. And in one case, you could only use that money to build new schools, not occupy the schools, not fill the schools with teachers, but just to build the building. Well, only in a few cases around the state of Colorado was that ever beneficial. And some of the older schools in smaller communities on the eastern and western slopes of Colorado were able to benefit from that. Everywhere else, no one could benefit from it because they weren't going to tear down the school. They didn't have the money to fill a new one, even if they built a new school. So it really became problematic to use that money and to be able to utilize it appropriately. Now, they did put in some really good programs in regards to education and drug prevention, but it was a small amount of the money as opposed to the other. And so it never, I'll just tell you, here in Colorado, it never really caught on. They never really spent a lot of time on it. And so when this case happened and it really made the difference on how law enforcement addressed it, we started to address things really differently. We started to focus things differently. Some of the consequences that we have seen and that other jurisdictions have seen is traffic crashes have gone up by 10% involving fatal crashes. We are having more crashes because of drug related. And you can see 25% of all fatal crashes had marijuana residue or marijuana concentrate in the body stream, in stream of the body at autopsy after the crash. So we know that it's affecting it. And we know that it's causing problems in the state of Colorado. Colorado's average for use of marijuana was above everywhere else in the state of Colorado. I believe that's now tapering to a leveling space because we have other states that are allowing marijuana. Oklahoma just did it, which is a neighboring state on our south corner of our state. And so there's no more transportation now coming from Colorado through Kansas into Oklahoma because now Oklahoma has their own law. And so they're now addressing it. We did a presentation similar to this to the Oklahoma County Sheriff's officers about 2 years ago. And now they are seeing the impact of it. Some of the other things that were, again, unintended consequences, or someone should have seen that this was going to happen. The largest increase of users of marijuana are between 18 and 25 years old. I'm sure we have some doctors or some people on this call right now that know that those are still very formative years of your brain. You're still really growing and learning. And now we're impacting it with a whole new drug that is brought into your system that we know impacts your ability to think. We saw a huge increase in our senior high school kids, having the largest increase from all of our past years, that group of kids, because these are the kids that are turning 17 and 18 while they're in high school. And now they have a lot of freedom, and it's free to have marijuana in the state of Colorado. Well, the law says you can't have it unless you're 21 or under. That doesn't impact 18-year-olds. Now they just know that they can go out and get it, and it made it so much easier for them to get it. One of the tragedies that has continued to occur from this is that the increase in juvenile overdoses really due to edibles. And I'm here to tell you, I focus on when they talk about marijuana concentrate and marijuana edibles and how those are going to be made available to your citizens. Because as you know, with marijuana, when you're smoking it, you start to get the effect almost instantly. It starts to make its effect chemically on your body. When you are digesting edibles and you have an 18-year-old kid who's used to smoking and getting high once or twice, now he's got some edibles. He takes the edibles. It's not doing anything because it's now got to go through the digestive system to impact his body. He's not getting anything. So what's he do? He takes 2 more. Now he's significantly overdosed on THC. The other thing that we're seeing, the THC level from 2021 marijuana compared to the THC level when I was a high school kid in 1976 is completely different. So far off. It is so much higher and so much more dangerous now because of their just ability to grow marijuana differently. And of course, now they're lacing it with all kinds of things. And when you have young people having access to marijuana and edibles, because it's so easy to hide them and they can put them in their backpack and they can eat them like gummy bears when they're in school. But because they're not prepared to know that it's going to take a longer time to affect, they overdose on them. And we've had some horrible tragedies here in Colorado, both with adults and juveniles, where they have become aggressive, where we've had homicide, suicides, where we've had people who have harmed themselves very significantly as juveniles because they overdosed to such a degree that they didn't have any control over their bodies. And those were almost non-existent in regards to drug type of effects on our juveniles in the state of Colorado until the marijuana bill was passed and we started to go through all of these systems, because we made it simpler for them to obtain it and to possess it. And then no one questions a kid eating a brownie or eating gummy bears or any of those other kinds. No one asks them a question for it. And you're not going to have your testing equipment there if you do test them if you're in a school. And sadly, these young people are overdosing, and we're losing good, valuable human beings because of this drug, marijuana, and its passage by the laws here in Colorado. These are some of the impacts that we've had because of, and we in law enforcement argue this fact, that even though they passed the law that you can cultivate marijuana legally under the guidance of the state, and you can sell it legally at any one of the shops, that the black market is going to go away. The black market didn't go away. And I'm going to show you some pictures here in a few minutes of impacts of the black market. One of the things that we have seen is lots of house fires. Where I live and work is southern Denver, suburb of Denver. And what we are seeing in both Arapahoe and Douglas and Jefferson counties, which is to the northwest of me, is that the black market folks will come in, they will rent a house, pay cash for 6 months, throw it down on the table, say, I'll take your house for 6 months. People who are having problems making their mortgages, or they're trying to buy another house, whatever, take them up on it. They leave, they go into the house, they gut it, and they put in hydroponics, and they're every inch of that house has got marijuana growing in it. Now, what happens is that you end up with electrical fires in a community that is very affluent, the Perry Park area of my county. The houses are on 2 and 3 and 4 acre lots, thick forest. People are coming in and renting those houses, and we had a house that caught on fire and burnt to the ground, and of course started a small forest fire. And it was all because of folks that were buying or leasing the house for the black market purposes of growing marijuana. So it has impacted even our retail sales, because they're able to make more marijuana than the retail sellers can sell it legitimately, and they can sell it cheaper. Obviously, what we're seeing around the dispensaries is an increase in armed robberies. And the reason being is that in the state of Colorado, you cannot have a dispensary and collect cash and deposit it into a bank that is FDIC protected. So what they have done is they have hired these companies to come in and collect their money. And then those companies put ATM machines all around the metro area and where I live and work. And then they put that money in those ATM machines, and then you go use that ATM when you're down watching the Rockies or the Avalanche, or you're going out to dinner, you use that ATM, and now they're inserting that money into your bank through an ATM machine. The feds have not interfered in that. The state have not interfered in that. And that's where a large portion of their, as I call it, money laundering back into the system. But what has happened in a lot of other places is that these dispensaries that are making the money, they're taking their cash home and putting it in a safe in their house. After a while, they have a disgruntled employee. That person knows about it, goes right to the house, knows where there's hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash, and we end up in a robbery. We, unfortunately, in the city of Aurora, had a homicide and a shootout in one of the outside one of the dispensaries when they were going to collect the money. Crimes of violence did not go down. Crimes of violence went up in and around those areas because you had an influx of people that were coming there, and people who wanted to take advantage of them would follow them there and take advantage of them there. So the vulnerability of certain people became a focal point in certain parts of Denver metro area, to where the violent crime in that area would grow up. The other part about it is clearly an increase in gang activity, because who's not going to get involved in making a lot of money? If gangs can do it, they will. And we have seen both the Crips, the Bloods, and the MS-13s definitely making an impact. Most recently, we are seeing biker gangs, the Mongrels and the Hells Angels, who are pretty strong in the Colorado area, along with a couple other smaller groups, Sons of Silence. They are taking advantage of this, and their criminal element is preying off of this legitimate legalized business of the sale of marijuana. Here's a quick search warrant of photographs of a house that we knew that was involved in black market marijuana. And so we were able to do a couple of search warrants and takedowns. And these are some of the guns that we got from that takedown in a regular neighborhood, a nice neighborhood where kids grow up and ride their bicycles, and elementary school is just down the streets. So we are not, this did not stop the influx of organized crime coming into the state of Colorado. This is interesting. You can see on the top part there, they've got hydroponics, and they basically just gutted a portion of a barn, and they are growing it, the marijuana inside that barn. Bottom left-hand corner where you see that silver pickup truck, that is one of my cop cars right there in that trailer. The house that you can't see it, just to the right of it as you look at the screen, is where the right picture is. That's inside the house in the basement, and they just started making adjustments. You can see the beams in the house. They were at hydroponics all over the place. The house is full of mold and mildew, and they're growing hundreds and hundreds of plants in there and then transporting them to these other places to grow them to their maturity. So this is what's happening in the houses in the state of Colorado. And I'm telling you, it'll happen in the state of New York because the opportunity will present itself. Here's another one where you can see this is a downstairs in a house. They just cut holes in the wall for ventilation. What we took out of that house is on the bottom left-hand corner of the piles of the marijuana. This is to the right of it. This is the marijuana growing in the house. You see they got the fans in there. Lots of electricity. They're not doing stuff up to code. Lots of water moving around, a lot of electricity, a lot of heat, lots of lights, and that's why we end up getting houses burned down. That upper right-hand corner was just some of the recovery of what we did in just one of the houses that is growing illegal marijuana. That is supposed to be involved in the legal sale of marijuana. Again, here's another one. This is one in a house. And you can always tell narcotics cops, the sheriff could probably appreciate this. You look in the center of the picture, you see one of the narcotics guys. It's a task force guy. He's got his badge right there in the center. And that's a big plant. Those are big plants right there. 6-foot plants. They're going to produce. These are much bigger over here. These are probably 3-foot plants. They're going to produce a lot of money. And here's a house that has added in fans. They put in new air ducts with heaters, and you can see how dangerous this would be in a house. Again, here's some of the stuff that we took that was already prepackaged for sale and distribution. So they're making a lot of money, and it is not affecting. When the legislators say it's going to stop the black market, I'm here to tell you it will not. It will just increase your black market. Here's another display of it. The plants to the right are bagged up from us. You can see the neighborhood right here, lots of pine trees. This is a wintertime where we took off this house. The house is very warm, and everybody could tell the house was warm all the time. The electricity was going like crazy. The fans were blowing, and it was blowing outside. You could smell the marijuana in the neighborhood. And then this is some of the packaged stuff that they had put together already in pre-sealed bags, ready to be for transportation. Some of this, just some stats from the impact unit that's in my county. In 2020, we had 247 pounds of marijuana, 395 marijuana plants, 75 grams of marijuana concentrate. This is what's important when you look at 2021. This is in the middle of the pandemic, and we were still working the cases. They were working it. Now we're here in 2021. To date, 93 pounds of marijuana, 75 plants. That right there strikes me is that we're missing a bunch of stuff. But here's what's really the big thing: 2,085 grams of marijuana concentrate. So they're preparing this for edibles, and it makes a huge impact on your community. And again, I'm a suburb of the Denver metro area. I've got almost 400,000 people in my county. I have 3 cities inside my county, and this task force works together. And since 2013, which was really the key to the medical marijuana and legalization of marijuana, 500 marijuana investigations that were that of illegal sales, manufacturing, and distribution of marijuana. I put this on here, and I think I sent it to Anita, but these are a lot of the stuff I got from Rocky Mountain HIDA and from their staff. But this is a great article. You can see the link in there on what we are seeing in marijuana growth and the business of marijuana in the state of Colorado. And then, of course, these two, this right here, the National Marijuana and the bottom part is from our HIDA, Rocky Mountain HIDA. The other part is NIMN, and it is a task force through Rocky Mountain HIDA that really focused on initiatives. This one specifically is the marijuana initiative. And this is where we are seeing a lot of the information that is being shared back and forth to communities so they can find ways to get information to share with their legislators. Those are the kinds of the information sheets that I would really encourage you to get a little bit into. I'm going to stop that there and come back and see you all and answer some questions. But what I want to talk about, just a couple quick things, is I made some notes before talking to Anita. The couple things that was supposed to happen with the legislation and the money that was supposed to be used was for drug programs in your communities, education programs in your communities, and programs that would help those who were afflicted by drug abuse, and how we would bring the community together. That money was always set for that purposes, but we have not seen what you would think is this massive growth to push on education. What we've seen is the opposite of it, where you can go into certain jurisdictions and there's still dispensaries everywhere. There's no information in the community about the impact of marijuana. And we liken it to the old days of everyone bought cigarettes in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, and everyone smoked cigarettes. And then we realized, smoking cigarettes is probably not very good to you. And the Surgeon General came out and said, smoking cigarettes is not very good for you. And all kinds of education programs came out to allow people to make good, reasonable, responsible decisions on their own of what you should do. The money that was set aside and the taxes that was collected for the sale of legal marijuana in the state of Colorado is not being utilized like it was originally designed in the law. Here's another part. The district attorney's offices are still having to file major cases on cultivating marijuana. They are not getting the assistance of the money that was originally earmarked for prosecution because, quite frankly, they don't want to prosecute anyone. And so a lot of that money that we got originally, which they called gray money, marijuana gray money, we were able to buy one-time vehicles. We were able to buy that truck and that trailer and other things that we would utilize. We put a little bit of money into our social media for education, but it was minuscule in the amount of actually what money was collected and what money is still in the state treasurer in the state of Colorado right now available to be used, but it's so restrictive that it can't be used. And no legislators want to go in there and adjust it because it's politically dangerous. So we backed ourselves into a really horrible corner. But for communities like your community here, and I'm incredibly impressed of the diversity of all the folks that you have on this call, as this community coming together to say, how can we keep our community safe? Whether you like marijuana, you think the sale of marijuana is good for your community or not, I'm here to tell you that there's going to be unintended consequences, and those consequences are going to impact your juveniles and your young people, and it's going to increase the overdoses of those folks, particularly for the edibles and the concentrate, and it's going to impact your law enforcement because it's not going to slow down the illegal trafficking of drugs. It's not. All it's going to do is create another layer of some government entity that's taxing what they're indicating as a licensed, legitimate marijuana facility. So it is a problem. Very few law enforcement executives in the state of Colorado supported it. We're now dealing with it and trying to be creative and finding ways to create task forces to focus on what we can do to impact it, but also what can we do to impact the community that helps educate the rest of the world that listens to your community, to your churches, to the rest of your community that doesn't often listen to what law enforcement is saying, and how we can help focus that. And that's where we're at right now today. So I'll open it up for some questions that anyone might have, because I don't want to leave you with any unanswered questions.
Well, Sheriff Spurlock, thank you for that presentation. I'm disillusioned, I have to say, but it certainly opens our eyes. I had a question about zoning. I don't know if you got involved in that at all in your county. The city of Watertown is on the cusp of resetting its zoning, and we were wondering, we want to submit a letter about this issue to the city to express our concern about where legal sales will happen. Did you have any insight into that issue?
So we did. So my jurisdiction, Douglas County, the Board of County Commissioners got together with the 3 municipalities and their city councils and mayors, and we came up with a resolution and essentially created a resolution, which we were allowed to do with inside the law, that would prohibit the sale, distribution, or manufacturing of legalized marijuana inside Douglas County. And we had to do that through zoning, through the business licensing, and essentially said, you can't possess this license in Douglas County to produce this product. We prohibit that. And we had probably a month of hearings on it, and we were able to get it passed. Now, full disclosure, I have a very conservative county. You cross the street on County Line Road and you're in Arapahoe County, and it is not very conservative. It is a mixed bag. And then within 7 miles, you're in the city of Denver. So you can only imagine that on the other side, there are a lot of dispensaries. But inside our community, we did put together a resolution. We worked through zoning and business licensing, and essentially made it that it's prohibited to possess one of those licenses in unincorporated Douglas County or within the 3 municipalities that are within sight.
Do you, just a follow up, do you know of the areas that allowed this to happen? Did they work on particular zoning?
So let's take Arapahoe County, for instance, which is just north of me. And what they did is obviously not around any schools. So inside the law, not allowed to have a distribution within so many feet of a school or daycare, or there was one other like a senior housing facility. Other than that, you could be in a strip mall, or you could be you cannot have it in a residential area. That was the other thing. There was no businesses in residential areas. So they did carve out some areas, and in here in Colorado, you can clearly see, particularly in the metro area, that where the dispensaries are at, they basically took over old banks, old shop strip malls, and they converted those into their facilities. And then off-site, they had to get special zoning for their manufacturing sites. So big factories that were defunct, they'll come in and buy those, and people get excited about it. But what they're going to do is they'll seal it up and they'll just grow marijuana in it and then serve the distribution places. So there will be an insurgence of money coming into your community, because they're going to buy some of the old buildings, and they'll be buying from people, and then they're going to, if it's inside their zoning and licensing, and then they will just start growing their marijuana in those locations as one of their distribution locations.
Just at least increase jobs.
Sheriff, did you see a increase in heroin use and overdoses since the marijuana had been legal in your state?
Reverend, thanks for that question. I'll tell you, I should have put those numbers in. We did. We saw an increase of heroin overdoses and use by those under the age of 21. And we attribute that to the marijuana cost increasing and the heroin availability by the cartels to bring it into the metro area, reducing the price. And then, of course, you have someone who is used to smoking marijuana and not used to either smoking heroin or injecting heroin, and you ended up having overdoses and deaths. And we did work a number of those, and we did see a number of those. And when I say a number, I could say we're up into the double digits of it impacting our community.
Wow.
Sheriff, if I may, I have a brief question. Nolan Pipkin with the District Attorney's Office up here. As far as enforcement mechanisms for your office, did you see a lot of power stripped from you when that legislation went into effect? What are some legal challenges that you face with maybe enforcing amounts of marijuana, other drug related issues to that?
So it did impact the prosecution, particularly on how we got to it. So there was a lot of motions for dismissal based upon the officer's initial contact, which was the legal amounts or the smaller amounts, and we were not allowed to conduct investigations or parlay investigations based upon legitimate legal businesses, obviously. And so that did impact our ability to be part of a prosecution. One of the other issues that happened is because the state became so engrossed in this fact that we were going to legalize marijuana and make money from it, it was very difficult for the elected DAs to go out and aggressively prosecute people, because it wasn't in their minds the interest of the community and the people. And that became a problem in our state, because in the metro areas, they were not prosecuting cases. And in the rural areas of Colorado, they were prosecuting those. And so we started to see some division between even the District Attorney's Council. And it did make a difference, and it's still making a difference today. It's very difficult for our guys right now. The use of our canines and drug sniffing dogs is essentially useless now, because they train them. They don't really train them to that's marijuana and that's heroin. They just know that it's a drug, and so we have had to really do a complete switch on our training. That is huge for the district attorney, because when we take over a van that's full of fentanyl or something else, they've got, the DAs now have got to be creative and working on how we got our probable cause from a marijuana sniffing dog. And so we ended up having to retrain our dogs, and we stopped training them with the scent of marijuana, and they're being focused on other types of scents for their training.
Hi, Sheriff. I was wondering, because, well, let me step back. Yesterday, we listened to a presentation called Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act by a lawyer. And he spoke that the powers of the control boards are just almost unlimited, that they can regulate basically everything. And number one is that the experience in your county, and if it is, can kind of talk about that. And also, like we do merchant compliance checks with underage alcohol operation, can you do merchant compliance checks with marijuana? Or does that fall under the control board and is prohibited?
So that's a very good question, because we're in the process of doing some of those battles right now, because we work with the state of Colorado Department of I don't remember what they're down there, but basically our alcohol regulation group, and we do stings all the time. And we use underage people that are attached to our office through our Explorer program or whatever, that are 19 years old, and they're buying liquor. So we have worked towards that in regards to marijuana. Now, this is what's interesting, is that most of all the violations that the district attorneys have ever filed is the backdoor sale of legitimate marijuana in a dispensary that has a license, but they're selling it out the back door at a reduced price, or they're selling other manufactured marijuana out the back door. So when we try to go into the front door, they're very restrictive, and that's part of that board. They made it very restrictive. When you come in, you have to show an ID. That has to be a state identification for state of Colorado, because we will sell to citizens from another state, but it is a lesser amount of marijuana that they can buy. But if you're a Colorado citizen, you can buy a certain amount with a Colorado ID or some kind of a government issued ID. And they are very, very restrictive on who's coming in. Now, they are required to allow law enforcement to come into their store at any time. So if we go to it, we show our badges, they have to let us in. But then we're restricted to what we can do. We can't look at their log. We're not really supposed to be even talking to the customers. It's really, there is a marijuana police in Colorado. There are a couple cops. Basically, they're just doing regulation stuff. But the regulators from this have a tremendous amount of power. And what they did is they really honed it down. But what we're seeing in most of the criminal cases is that it's the marijuana being sold out the back of the door, not the front. And so our stings are not effective, because they did do a good job on making it very difficult getting people in the front door from a legitimate purchase. It's the illegal sale. And now it is against the law, and it's in the law. You cannot sell marijuana out the back door, even if it's legal marijuana. It's against the law to do it, because it has to go through the taxation side.
Okay. I have a follow-up question. You had talked about the edibles and how kids and youth are being transported to hospitals or to the children's hospital in your case. I was wondering what the impact of edibles has been on CPS, Child Protective Services.
So it has been an impact, and what's interesting in my community, we have 4 hospitals on our northern end. One of them is a children's hospital, and then the others are, your standard hospital with emergency rooms in them, trauma 1s and 2s. And we have seen, and we did see an increase early on of overdoses from a variety of people, to include youth, that were overdosing on the edibles because they were waiting for the effect, and then the effect hit them. And so we did see those. We have had some overdose deaths in those areas. But what we saw through our DHS is that when a person under the age of 21 comes into the hospital and is a marijuana overdose, the hospital is not required to report that unless the person is under the age of 18. You're not allowed to buy marijuana unless you're 21 in Colorado, but you can still have an overdose and no one's going to say anything about it unless you're under the age of 18. So we have been working on that particular language and trying to work with DHS on it, because it has increased. Denver General Hospital, which is right in the center of downtown Denver, has all kinds of issues. I do know that they had an increase in overdoses, and as has the other big hospitals, Anschutz over in Aurora, UC Health, both in Boulder and in the metro area, have seen an increase in their overdoses, almost always related to edibles, not smoking.
Yeah, wow. I just have one more comment. And again, yesterday we listened to a presentation by Dr. Aaron Weiner. I think he was from Michigan. I'm not quite sure. However, he had statistics from Naperville dispensaries in Colorado. I have no idea where Naperville is.
Naperville, yeah.
And they would, it takes 34 dispensaries are required to meet the 1% of the Naperville annual operating budget. That is amazing.
Yes, I was looking to see if I could find it. I don't see it here. It's not familiar to me, but there are places in Colorado that have dispensaries that essentially fund the city's taxation. That's where they get it. Now, we had a very small town that we contract law enforcement. We contract everything for them, and it is in it's a little place called Larkspur, Colorado, along the freeway just north of Colorado Springs. And they wanted to put a dispensary in so they could increase their taxation, so they could develop some of their little areas that they wanted to do. There is the Colorado Renaissance Festival is housed in their little town, and everyone was against it except for members of the city council, because they wanted to have this dispensary. And of course, I spoke out against it because it will create all kinds of impacts into our community, notwithstanding the traffic issues and other issues down along the freeway and where it's at next to the forest. And they chose not to do that, but they had a number of projections that indicated that because we didn't have any dispensaries in Douglas County, that the sale would increase significantly for people getting off the freeway. And the saving grace was us, is that the Colonel of Colorado State Patrol spoke out about it, as did I, about how dangerous it is to have a dispensary where you can pull off the freeway and then get right back on the freeway again when you've got the dispensary. Now they push back on, say, well, there's liquor stores everywhere. Okay. And yes, that is true. But when you have a bag of gummy bears and a Mickey's Big Mouth, you're less likely to open the Mickey's Big Mouth and drink it while you're driving down the road because the cops are going to see and you're going to go to jail. But when you're eating the gummy bears driving down the street, and we argued the issue that we contact people all the time and we see the edibles, we know how they're packaged. They have to have a distinctive marking on them. They have to make it very clear that it is marijuana, CBD oil, or edibles. And if they're not packaged properly, that in itself is against the law. How dangerous that would be for the motoring public of the state of Colorado. And again, I said earlier, we've seen a significant increase of fatal crashes or serious crashes involving SBI, where the driver of the car at fault had an increased amount of THC in his system that we later will be able to relate back to either the smoking of marijuana or the use of edibles. And so it has increased our traffic safety in Colorado.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? We're slightly over time.
I know you run a really tight ship, Anita, and I respect that. I just want to take a moment to thank Sheriff Spurlock for taking your time. Your experience is so valuable to us, and we're really appreciative of your time, more than my words could say. And number two, well, what I want to say about the legalization of marijuana in New York State was sold to our community, statewide community, as discouraging the black market. What it's going to do is discourage the black market and increase all these revenues where we're just going to be rolling in cash. So those two things are so perfectly clearly stated by you that are untrue and very unlikely to happen, even though most of us in law enforcement knew, even when it was being whispered years ago, that the black market was just going to skyrocket, take off, and the revenue wasn't going to be there. So thanks for telling me. And I see Chief Donahue's on the call too from our Watertown PD, verifying what we knew pretty much all along. And then also, yes, I've been to your county and it's gorgeous, and I can't wait to get back to Colorado, but we have a gorgeous geography and community here, so you're always welcome. Please come visit us.
Well,
Maybe he will come to the marijuana summit. He can fly right on out here, right into Watertown.
maybe
That's another topic.
I'll tell you that the Haidas that you have in New York, we get together often, and I'm going to reach out to our director, and I know that they talk to each other. We are pushing a new marijuana initiative again, so hopefully maybe we can get up there, and I can get up to see a sheriff and see your community. But
That's wonderful.
we can do for you, speaking on behalf of the Rocky Mountain Haida, on behalf of the County Sheriffs of Colorado, and of course my office, if you need any kind of data, because I just went through this very quickly, but if you need any kind of data or information, I'll make all three of those organizations available to you, anyone on the call, whatever you need. I also have connections through our Health and Human Services and our hospitals, so we could get some particular data if you want, if you're still in that fight. And I would encourage you to continue to do the fight against your legislators to slow it down or make it so incredibly restrictive to sell or dispense or grow marijuana inside your state. It's not good for your state. It won't be helpful. You're not going to have a lot of money, and you're not going to benefit from it by any means.
Thank you so much. Somebody asked if they could have your email address. Would that be appropriate for me to give that out?
Yes, yeah, you sure can. I was going to type it in the chat, but if you want to give it out to everyone.
Oh, go ahead, type it put it in the chat. Because that'd be awesome. And while you do that, our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, June 15th, 2 to 3 p.m. Always on the third Tuesday of the month, 2 to 3. And again, thank you everybody for coming to the meeting. I hope that you have information that you didn't have before. And I look forward to seeing everybody on the Zoom-I-Do next month. And unless somebody has an urgent matter they want to bring forth, 3, 2, 1. Okay, goodbye. Thank you, Sheriff.
everybody.
Both
Thanks,
sheriffs.
Sheriff.
Thanks,
Anita,
Sheriff. Take care.
Yes,
do we have sheriff's permission to broadcast or to post this recording on Facebook and social media? Is that something we can do?
may we post it on social media?
You may for me. That's fine. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
awesome. Fabulous. Thank you so much. I
You bet.
probably will give you a call, Sheriff.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
You guys. Bye-bye.